Look at you all. You came. You heard that it was about a widow and you still came. That is so sweet. Okay. Spoiler alert, my husband died. And here's the thing, I've learned the price of living a long life is to watch people you love die. You know, I'm 70, I get it. But my husband? I don't think so. I mean, it had to be some kind of cosmic prank. Only I didn't laugh. I felt like my life had ended. But it didn't. It's been 5 years, and some people around me feel like I should have found some closure. But here's the thing about closure, okay? It doesn't exist. You know, it's something made up by Oprah or somebody. You know, my husband will always be a part of my life. Ron, that was his name, but sometimes I like to call him my husband because it makes me feel like he still is, you know, making me laugh in the middle of every single fight we ever had. Waking up to his majestic Scottish head on the pillow beside me, looking into those dazzling green eyes, placing my hands on his broad shoulders, which tapered down to literally no ass. Really, none. But I felt protected, you know, not that I needed protection, but I enjoyed it all the more because I didn't need it. We flew so high together. I had that much farther to fall, you know. Icarus had nothing on me. Actually, I've always kind of admired him, you know, but people are so judgmental about Icarus. They can't simply tell you that he flew too high and his wax wings melted and he fell to his death. They have to tell you how he deserved what happened to him, how his father warned him not to be an actress. How his father warned him not to fly so high, he didn't listen, and he got what he deserved for being too ambitious. So I Googled him and I saved it. Yeah. Icarus complex, a form of overcompensation wherein an individual formulates grandiose aspirations for future achievement despite lacking proper talent, experience, and/or personal connections. Now, that struck me as a rather cruelly accurate description of widowhood. But then I scrolled down a little further and I found this. We tend to forget that Icarus was also warned not to fly too low because seawater would ruin the lift in his wings. Flying too low could be more dangerous than flying too high. Isn't that great? I mean, I always thought the most dangerous thing you can do in life is to play it safe. But I had to admit that's exactly what I was doing. I mean, safety can be seductive, you know. And then one day I was eating a creme brulee and just savoring it, you know, just the right ratio of caramel crunch to creamy custard. And I wasn't thinking, oh, Ron would love this creme brulee. I was alone with my creme brulee. And I thought, okay. And then my plumber was fixing my sink and I suddenly and unexpectedly became fixated on his biceps and his tank top. And for that moment, I could think about nothing else. I wasn't thinking about Ron. I was emerging from the ICU of grief. I was a plant bending toward the light. But then every step I took toward life felt like a step away from him and I couldn't do it. I was trapped in my aloneness and it no longer felt safe. I needed help. So I began treatment with myself as therapist because bizarrely, after repeated attempts to find a grief therapist, I gave up. My therapy regimen, the exposure therapy of online dating. That's right, I started therapeutic dating. I also had a less clinical reason. I just wanted a diversion. And online dating, especially in the scrolling phase, looking at pictures, reading profiles, it's sort of like window shopping. You're safely outside the store. I don't remember the exact moment when I went from window shopping to stepping inside the store, trying to follow the rules of Gary, a classmate of mine from UCLA who has been online dating for 10 years. He has been my dating doula. And it goes like this: scrolling profiles to contacting, first text, then the first phone call, then meeting for coffee or a drink, in that order. However, as with so many things in my life, I find it hard to follow the rules. Yeah, which is how I found myself riding in a pickup truck with an age-appropriate gentleman as he drove me around his property to show me his collection of Civil War memorabilia. Yeah. Actual cannons. Yeah, with stacks of little cannonballs that were strangely adorable. And all this Civil War memorabilia, and there was a lot of it, was interesting. In an anthropological kind of way, kind of cool. I mean, I did have a pang of what's happened to my life, but I didn't dwell on it. I met his horses with only the slightest feeling of a prospective bride being brought home to meet the family. One of his horses aggressively pinned me against the wall, and I did wonder if it might be this guy's idea of foreplay, but I didn't say anything. The truth is, I'm curious and open, mostly. I watched, fascinated by the demonstration of his antique button-making machine, which he uses to recreate authentic buttons for the Civil War uniforms they used in the reenactments of the Battle of Gettysburg. Mesmerized by someone so taken by this arcane device, Oh, red flag. He may not need a relationship. I mean, he has a button-making machine. But he did have a wife. She died. We're standing in her kitchen. This was her dream kitchen. I was stunned. It was utterly generic. I mean, imagine if Home Depot had a one-night stand with Target and they gave birth to a kitchen. After the presentation of the kitchen, he slipped in how he hates to cook before showing me his bedroom. Okay, I get it. He wants a home-cooked meal and sex. The currency of love, cherry pies and blowjobs. Only this guy wants delivery. Maybe the online thing has him confused. He thinks he found me on DoorDash, Now, we're at the moment of parting. This is a particularly fraught moment in the world of drive-by dating. Will we put a period on it, an exclamation mark, 3 dots? Now we're standing face to face and boom, 0 to 60. His lips are on my face. I mean, lips is too specific. When you get hit by a bus, you don't know where it hit you, you just know that it did. And after this aggressive, hard, closed-mouth kiss, he's pawing my body, running his hands down me in this weird way. Oh my God, of course, he's grooming a horse. Maybe he's out of practice with humans. Or maybe I'm the first person he's kissed since his wife died. Maybe he's lost and lonely without her. Maybe he's just trying to find his way home, like me. As I drive away, I feel compassion for him welling up in me, in direct proportion to the miles I put between us, but I won't be seeing him again, but he'll always be my first date. I can't believe I'm using that word. I mean, can you be 70 and go on a date? I never dated, not even in high school. My first serious boyfriend would come and I'd jump in the back of his VW bus and we'd go off and have sex. I was a hippie. While other girls were pinning on corsages and going to prom, I was putting out cigarettes on my jeans and fornicating in the back of vans. But now I'm all grown up and going on my second date. This time in the city as opposed to the country, which is what New Yorkers call anything over the George Washington Bridge. I live in both places. I arrive at the restaurant and I spot my retired ER doctor sitting alone at a table. Now, he is wearing a little hipster hat. Like the kind Adam Driver would wear in an independent film. And earrings, plural, one in each ear. My hipster, in search of hipness, has come to town from Jersey City, which he informs me is the most diverse community in the tri-state area. Okay, I get how people who live outside Manhattan have to make themselves feel better about it, but this most diverse community in the tri-state area claim seems a bit grandiose, like something someone with 2 earrings would say. I don't mean to harp, but this 70-year-old man with his little hipster hat and multiple earrings told me instantly he was not for me. And, maybe he thought the same thing about me, okay? But the etiquette of dating doesn't allow us to pull the plug, So after dinner, I suggest a walk by the river, and along the way, apropos of nothing, he says, "So, do you have any friends in the city or all your friends up in the sticks?" Now, he has revealed himself as one of those urbanites who has a kind of binary sense of geography. The city, little black dresses, the country, coonskin caps. I saved myself the trouble of explaining to him that he's more likely to see a coonskin cap at the Met Gala than on the streets of Hudson. But does he really think I'm buying his act? I'm acting like I do, but I feel like an enabler. I mean, this guy doesn't need a date. He needs an intervention. I was in the middle of, not saying that, of course, I was in the middle of a sentence when he says, "I'm going to go home now." And I thought about that Tennessee Williams line, "Sometimes there is God so quickly." We get to the subway, we're at the moment of parting, and it happened again. Again! The attack of the incoming kiss. Boom! What the? Oh my God. Horseman was the first stranger I kissed in over 20 years. Hipster was the second. Both slam kisses. Okay, Kate. God, maybe that's how people kiss now, Styles change, right? I mean, the last time I kissed anyone other than Ron, people still had flip phones. And I must say, Ron set the bar very high. We'd find ourselves on the subway making out, 2 adults, 49 and 55, like a couple of teenagers who just discovered sex, We were drunk on each other. Okay, Kate. Where are you going with this? Nobody kisses like Ron? Nobody kisses like your husband who is dead, so if you can't kiss him, you're not going to kiss anybody? Oh my God. This is how Miss Havisham got started. So in the name of I don't know what, survival, moving on, in the name of not just lying down on the road and giving up, I make one more swipe, read one more profile, make one more date. My dating profile states clearly, interest in the arts a must, with arts and must in capital letters. So far, no takers. I mean, at this point, I'd be happy just to meet someone named Art. So when my scrolling landed on a reasonably attractive photographer-sculptor, my heart leapt. Oh, it is like discovering Picasso on Bumble. We met for coffee, and the first thing I noticed about him was that he had taken artistic license with his height. 5'7" in his profile, but 5'5" when he showed up. Now, this is common with profilers. They're sometimes older and always shorter than they say. You know, the age thing, it's more how you appear. So I can see how you might, but you don't appear 5'7" when you're 5'5", especially to someone who's 5'6", who is me. And even if I didn't care, did you think I wouldn't notice? And by the way, I do care. I prefer it if the man is taller than I am. I mean, call it my limitation, but I never really believed in Ava Gardner and Mickey Rooney, you know? I grew up with that old joke where Mickey says to Ava, "I want to make love to you." And she says, "If you do and I find out about it." But, you know, my photographer had a certain warmth and the confidence to make a direct connection. Height schmight, I had actually connected to another human being, which is how Mr. 5'5" and I ended up spending New Year's Eve together at my house. Oh yeah, I don't fuck around. No pun intended. I'd invited him to come up for a New Year's Eve party at my neighbor's house. You can stay in the guest room. He arrived early afternoon. I made lunch, moved to the living room, sat on the sofa, and patted a spot next to him. I went and sat down, and he proceeds to kiss me, you know, lips on mine. And then he starts to move in with his tongue, as one does, except he sort of lingers with the tip and does these little circles. I know. I try to push past it, but there's no budging him. I mean, he is going to do those circles. It's obviously his signature move. Happy New Year, Kate. I don't have to wait for the ball to drop. I'm being kissed by Pee Wee Herman. But I remind myself, I'm not in it for the kissing. I'm in it for the connection. So after the party, I put him in the guest room and we slept together. As in sleep. I mean, I realized I was sending a mixed message by inviting someone to spend the night and, you know, sex might be on the menu. But he understood I wasn't ready and it was all kind of okay. You know, it felt a little bit nice to have someone else in bed with me. So the next morning, I'm up making breakfast and he tiptoes up behind me and kissed me very sweetly on the back of the neck. Oh my God, that gesture was so lovely and unexpected that I might have ended up having sex with him, but he laughed right after breakfast. However, my relationship with Mr. 5'5" had proved its point. I now realized it was possible for me to be brought to the brink of being turned on by someone who wasn't my husband. And I discovered that simply knowing that was enough, that I wasn't ready for more. And by the way, neither was he. You know, his story about being in a long relationship and then being dumped by the woman only 2 months before, but he was over it, told me he was not telling himself the true story. We both just needed to know it could happen. That was our true connection. And after a few uninspiring phone calls, we drifted into ghosting each other. But to our credit, Mr. 5'5" and I parted the most civilized of ghosts. My next kiss also took place within the privacy of my home. I had met this gentleman online. Texting led to live chatting, as it sometimes does when the situation shows promise. He lived in North Carolina, which is not promising. And due to a baffling lack of judgment, I found myself accepting his offer to fly to Albany, where I would pick him up at the airport and he'd come to my house for an overnight visit. Did his willingness to travel over 500 miles for a blind date put up any red flags? Oh, no. Not for Madcap Kate. Yeah. She likes the fresh, cool wind in her hair, life without care. No, what happened was, on the phone, we had gotten carried away with travel excitement. You know, where we had been, where we wanted to go. And since I do want someone to travel with, having discovered traveling alone is not that much fun, I allowed myself to be transported to the land of airports, boarding passes, and a drink on the plane bound for somewhere fabulous. I met him at the airport. His hair arrived first, dyed black. Black, as in no such color exists on a man in his 70s. I was hoping for a little acknowledgement, you know, like, sorry about the hair, I was having it touched up, and the colorist had a stroke. Nothing. So the visit was not that remarkable, basically chatting and trying not to look at my watch or his hair. How did this man get in my house? Oh, Kate, you didn't follow the rules. Scroll, text, coffee. I went right from text to welcome to my home. You know, I'm blanking on his name, but let's just call him Dye Job. But the point of the story is the kiss. Another circle kiss. Little bigger circles this time, but same idea. And now I'm starting to think, oh my God, there's some kind of viral YouTube kissing tutorial that's teaching people this little stunt. You know, I've heard that on your way to finding your prince, you have to kiss a few frogs, but I'm starting to feel like the Jane Goodall of the frog tribe. You know, gone to live among them, I've kissed them, or I've been kissed by them, or kissed on, or kissed at. I never knew there were so many ways to fuck up a kiss. Oh, drinks at Bar Central. Yeah, with a tall, manly man. Now, this is the first time my heart hasn't kind of sunk when I first laid eyes on the guy. Bald, but I don't mind that. No, this guy was appealing. Great nose, big substantial hood ornament of a nose. You know, think George C. Scott. He's in documentary films. Does he make them, distribute them? Very unforthcoming. We're standing on 8th Avenue after leaving the restaurant, and suddenly I'm in a blur of kissing. Real fucking kissing. No bam, hard on the mouth, ambush, no little circles, just the real thing. And then kissing in the cab, and then one long, unbroken swirl through the front door of my apartment. What happened next? It's not logical. I'm not logical. We're in my apartment now, kissing madly. I touch his nose. He put his hand down my pants. And I knew instantly, I can't do this. I can't take my clothes off in front of a stranger. I mean, taking my clothes off in front of my husband was one thing. He was my husband. He loved everything about me. But even my in-shape 70-year-old body is still 70. You know, shit happens. You do not want to know. And even though, in my experience, if they can touch it, they like it, that can't be how I introduce myself to you. And I'm just realizing all this while Mr. Nose's hand is down my pants. So I finesse my way out of it, and he growls, I didn't think this was going to happen, as he makes his exit with me calling after him, I love your nose. And I realized I was passionate about the kissing, not about him, and he was passionate about getting laid, not about me. But I had been kissed. The kisses, I knew it still exists. And that discovery made me miss my husband all the more. And so began the long, unblinking series of revelations that fall under the title of Every Time Something Good Happens, You Feel Worse. I have started to go out without you. It seems so strange and unfamiliar, but bit by bit, I must make my way into the world without you. You have already done this, gone to a place I cannot go, and now I must do the same. I can go somewhere, you know, poetry slamming at the Green Mill Tavern, but a part of me will always be with you, wishing you were with me, having the time of our lives. But it's not within my power to make that happen, so bit by bit, I must make my way unfamiliarly into a new way of being. So I go to this Elizaville town picnic for where I live upstate. You know, somebody's big house, barn, outbuildings. People brought things, food, music, activism, everything. I heard about it from a guy I play tennis with, Ian. Ian said, "Oh, you should go. You'll meet people. It'll be fun." Okay, maybe I should. You know, meet people the old-fashioned way. So I go, and I'm mingling, and I drift over to this group sitting down, and I start to take a chair, and this woman says, "I think that chair is taken." Okay, never mind. Cunt. An underused word, by the way. And I use it in the British sense, applying it to men and women equally who are basically being assholes. So I try to talk to another couple, you know, ask them where they're from, where they live. Goes nowhere. They're not used to talking to someone like me, a woman alone. They freeze up like a toothless vagrant has accosted them. But that's almost easier, isn't it? You know, they know what the vagrant wants, money. They know how to dismiss that. But what does this woman want? My husband. Yeah, they go straight to Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction. It's like I'm carrying a pot with a boiling rabbit. The other thing I get is disturbed dismissal. You know, like I'm past my expiration date. But at least in those two scenarios, I get noticed. The one that I find so depressing and enraging is the no reaction. They see an older woman and they just delete, Photoshop me out of the picture. Look, I have friends and interests and a big social life, but I miss being loved by Ron. Loving him, thinking about him, taking care of him. I miss making your tea. I weaned you off of Red Rose and got you into PG tips. Now I just take care of myself and I do a good job, you know? Get up in the morning, do some yoga and a French lesson because I'm fucking improving myself. Oh, secours. That's French for help. But when I call for help, the only person I want to answer is my husband. You know, I've been independent my whole life. Ron and I were co-independent. The joy of my life with him is that we could be alone together. And once you've had that, it's like life without it. It's like, what's the point? I mean, traveling together in that bubble was like a magic carpet. You know, going to the store could be like going to Venice. And without him, going to Venice is, yeah, like going to the store. Yeah, Deanne Arbus wrote, "The world is a Noah's Ark on the sea of eternity, containing all the endless pairs of things irreconcilable and inseparable. And heat will always long for cold, and back for front, and smiles for tears, and mutt for Jeff, and no for yes, with the most unutterable nostalgia there is." So if it's my biological destiny to be part of a couple, what if I do meet someone, you know, not wearing a hipster hat, tall, funny, and a great kisser? What if I call my bluff and set him down in front of me? Could I see past Ron? And as I say this, I can feel that my loving him, missing him, longing for him is my way of keeping him in my life. When I met the love of my life, I was not actively looking for it. You know, there was no search. I'm an actor who goes from job to job, and I met Ron doing my first guest star on a Law and Order. He was the judge, I was opposing counsel. We had 5 days of filming, 4 days in the courtroom, 1 day in his chambers, but we never spoke to each other. 5 years later, I'm doing The Graduate on Broadway, and I go to a late afternoon voiceover call, and I'm about to sign in, and I hear this voice, "I like your scarf." And I turn around and, oh, it's the judge from Law and Order. I go over, I go, we did a Law and Order together. And he goes, "Don't remember." But yeah, we started chatting, and turned out that his wife had died. And I said, not the same, but I had a long-term relationship breakup, and we were sort of commiserating. And then right before I went into my audition, I said, "Well, if you ever want to laugh, I'm doing a comedy on Broadway." And I gave him my phone number. A month later, he called and he said, "I don't want to see your show, but do you want to have coffee?" Now, he was benefiting from a very lucky coincidence that I don't care if people see my show. I love doing it, and I actually prefer performing for strangers. So we have coffee at a diner near my apartment, and it was just a whole lot of fun. And we get to the subway, and I'm going, "Well, you have my number." Didn't hear from him. Thanksgiving rolls around, and I call him up to wish him a happy Thanksgiving, and he gets on the phone and he says, "Oh, I've been meaning to call you. I wanted to ask you out to dinner." And I said, "Great. I'm doing this show, so I only have Sunday night off and Monday." And then he starts talking about the difficulty of driving into New York City. He lived in New Jersey. And I actually said, "Are you talking traffic to me?" And he goes, No, sorry, my kids are here, blah, 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 I'll call you." 2 weeks later, I run into him at another voiceover audition. I go in and come out, and I think he's going to be waiting there, like we'll go and have coffee. No, he left, like I loaned him money. So I'm walking to the subway thinking, "Kate, you think you're the cutest little trick in shoe leather, but that guy is not interested in you." Now we get to the holiday schedule for a Broadway play, which is 11 performances in a row. It's New Year's Eve, matinee evening, and it was a very balmy New Year's Eve. So I decided to walk home to my apartment on 95th Street from 45th Street. And along the way, I bought a little tin of caviar, and I had a little split of champagne, and I called up a girlfriend of mine, and we talked until midnight, and it was fantastic. Oh my God, I felt so good. That special good you only get from being hopeful. And I wanted to share my hopefulness with somebody. And Ron was the only person I knew who'd had a terrible year, so I called him because I wanted to say, "Don't worry, it's going to be great." His youngest son answered, and he got on the phone and he said, "I'm so glad you called. I'm so glad you called." And I made fun of him for all the things he did wrong, and we just laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. And then he said, "I really do want to see you again." And I said, "Okay, I have New Year's Day off. You're allowed to come over tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bring sandwiches and wine." I remember the first time I got up from the table. It was near the window. I was a woman who'd been single for a year. You were a man whose wife had died. I stood near you, and you lifted my long, sheer silk shirt and kissed my stomach. We went out to dinner across the street from my apartment. He spent the night, and we got married 1 year later on his idea, New Year's Day at 2 p.m. We were together almost every moment for the next 17 years. Just when I was about to give up on the idea of online dating, I mean, who knew there were so many ways to be disappointed? My friend Roger, who at the age of 78 had never had a single relationship in his life, inspired by my tales of Bumble, he went on a dating site himself, older gay men in Fresno. And his first date, turned into a friendship, into a relationship, into being a couple, and now they're going down the road together. And his Mr. Right is a chef. cherry pies and blowjobs. Right, that's my case. You know, I'm starting to think that maybe online dating is actually perfect for me. You know, it's a kind of safe space. I can have a kind of faux romantic life with no danger of meeting someone who will threaten to displace my husband. I have a large bowl of water that sits on the deck, and a cardinal came to sit on the edge. First just drinking, and then it wanted to bathe itself, but the bowl is too deep for a bird bath. It sat on the edge, desperate to get in, but knowing in its animal sense it was too deep. It fretted, kept moving along the edge, trying to figure out a way to get in without drowning. I too sit on the edge of my former life, looking into the abyss of my future, knowing it is too deep for me to jump. So, like my avian friend, I walk along the edge, looking, wondering if it will ever be a place I can wade or even dive into. Abyss. Yeah, abyss. Yep. Vocabulary.com, the noun abyss. There it is. The noun abyss refers to a deep chasm, either literal or figurative, making a momentous life decision with great uncertainty, like enrolling in a clown college. Wow. Tell me that didn't totally redefine abyss for you. Maybe redefinition is the key. You know, we're all alchemists. We can turn the lead of our lives into gold. Okay, yeah. Let's redefine one of my dates. Okay, my frog is 80 years old. Now, 80 is old in anyone's book, whereas I think of myself as old adjacent. And what really adds to his frogginess is that hop in his step, the hallmark of the old trying to read young. This delightful older gentleman is retired, but he has found a new career doing his dream job, tour guide. For our date, he is taking me to one of the secret wonders of the world, the built-to-scale model of the city of New York. All 5 boroughs, buildings, bridges, rivers, everything on the site of the 1964 World's Fair. I'd always wanted to see it, and he actually took me there. From there, we go on to discover the Chinese cuisine of Flushing, and it is a real discovery. I mean, truly, if your dream of seeing China has eluded you, take the 7 train to Queens. It is rather remarkable, but he is like, I don't know, Marco Polo discovering the Young Dynasty. I love this. It's so vibrant, throwing his arms up in the air and hopping around. When we pass an actual slaughterhouse where the smell of blood pours out, I'm over it. We stagger on, or in his case, hop, from restaurant to restaurant, looking at pictures of food outside because he is so young and vibrant, it must be a spontaneous choice. I pick up my food while he talks and talks and talks and talks, and it hits me. He's a tour guide. He's up front with a microphone. I have no lines in this scenario. I would say that my main discovery of my life among the frog people is that frogs as a species are very talkative. You know, these men are human jukeboxes, and once they start, yeah, there's no stopping them. You are not required to speak, and you will not be asked a single question. I mean, maybe it's dating age appropriately. You know, by the time they get to me, they have a whole lifetime to download. Or, oh my God, maybe I'm the first person who ever listened to them. It's kind of touching. Oh, wait. We were going to redefine my date, but hold on. I think there's a bigger idea here. I think maybe this redefining abyss as enrolling in a clown college might be the answer. You know, if I think of my frogs as clowns, I'm not kissing a frog hoping he becomes a prince. I'm kissing a clown. Well, it certainly would have helped with that date who mentioned several times during lunch that he had an edgy sense of humor without displaying even a glimmer of evidence. But if I could have had a sense of humor about that, I might have teased him about it and broken some kind of ice and, I don't know, released his inner Lenny Bruce. You know, if I could just seen him as a clown, I might have been more sympathetic. I mean, what's sadder than a clown that's not funny? I'll tell you what's sadder, if that clown is your date. We're at the moment of parting, and Mr. Edgy Sense of Humor says, "So, shall we see each other again?" Maybe? Maybe means no. No, it means maybe. Well, that's never going to get you to your goal. What is my goal? And Mr. Edgy Sense of Humor says, S-E-X. I'm speechless. What I wished I had said was, if my goal is S-E-X, it's not going to be with Y-O-U. Now, Ron had an actual sense of humor, totally unique, an unfettered imagination. Needless to say, our styles were different, but when our styles met, it was magic. We are riding in the car, as we have so many times over roads we know not by heart but well, except I am driving now. As we pass the sign they changed at the company that raises lab rats, I lament the new corporate logo, which is so bland and ugly, replacing the wildly inappropriate one, the one we always thrilled to see in all its terrible glory. A rat in a graduation cap and gown with a syringe tucked under its arm. So wrong, and yet so hilarious. I wonder if I will ever know anyone again who sees these things the way I do. I grab your arm and I want to shout, don't go, please don't go. But you are going. So I just say, I love you. I love you too, you say. He even got a laugh out of the grim woman who is testing him for dementia. I watched in horror. She asked him to draw a clock and he couldn't. My husband, with the glorious mind who had written a best-selling novel seemingly only moments before, was now being tested by his knowledge of the mundane. Inside, I'm screaming, who cares what day of the week it is? He's an artist. He doesn't need to know that. He looked to me for help, but I had to sit in silence. It was like watching someone drown and you don't know how to swim. In the middle of all this, she asked him to name his fingers. She points to his thumb. He does better with this one. And then she points to his index finger and said, what do you call that? And he says, finger. And she says, no, what's its name? Fred. Isn't a sense of humor a sign of intelligence? The ability to make unexpected associations, to point out the absurdity of this stupid fucking test of what was happening to our lives. But laughter couldn't change the diagnosis, and so began the dimming of his light. But it never dimmed the light coming from his heart. He is the sunniest of beings now. Every store he goes into, you have a wonderful store. Every person he sees, hi, how are you? He's like a one-man welcome wagon. But every once in a great while, the groundhog emerges to test the weather, and he says, as he did on our usual walk, am I headed for Palookaville? After a pause, I say, yes. And he says, I don't want to go. And I say, I know, but there is nothing to be done. Okay, he says with a shrug, and we continue on our walk. So together we went on our journey to Palookaville, My fears that he would be diminished or coming true. It was as if our life together was written in disappearing ink. We were always each other's best audience. We were a team. And now all our witty banter and our observations about the ironies and absurdities of life, our silliness, have been reduced to a single conversation we repeated like a mantra. Who do you love? I love you. Who do I love? You love me. Who am I? You're Kate. Who are you? I am Ron. One night we were repeating our mantra and I had an epiphany. I realized our conversation had not been reduced so much as it had been distilled. In those 8 lines, he told me everything I needed to know, that he loved me and that Kate and Ron were still a team. The thousands of words we used to say that to each other have been distilled into these few. It was the language of Palookaville. My husband and I both came into our relationship loving sex. It was our gift. We even had sex in Palookaville. When he could no longer give pleasure, he could still receive it. But we moved beyond even that to where simply by placing my hand on his neck, the force of his love was so distilled that in a single touch, one drop of that tincture could fill my heart. And then he died, and I came back alone. It felt like one of those travelers being returned to Earth at the end of Close Encounters. There was no more us. There was just me doing a one-woman show. One night I'm sitting in a bar and I strike up a conversation with the guy next to me. He's retired, but now he's telling me about his window cleaning business. In Palookaville, every word mattered. And now I've been returned to a world where conversation is like panning for gold, where you sift through 100 pounds of cliches in the hopes of finding one single thing worth talking about. But come on. You don't have to be the Dalai Lama to find some place on the continuum between the meaning of life and the meaning of Windex. Then, at a dinner party, I find myself talking to another man, seemingly viable, British, always good for me. The Brits don't find conversation an inconvenience. And the accent covers a multitude of sins. But our dialogue quickly became a monologue, and endless play-by-play of his recent heart procedures. By the end of it, I felt like I'd had a heart operation. Please, God, don't let this be my life. Maybe I could get a dog. But that's really giving up, isn't it? I mean, that's going to be your partner. Maybe I could get a puppet. No, seriously. Does anybody remember Sherry Lewis on Lamb Chop? Yeah. She was a strong, intelligent woman who had a rich, rewarding relationship with a sock. You have to do both voices, but, you know, there's something to be said for that. Or maybe it's time to redefine this whole trapped in a one-woman show thing. I mean, maybe it's not something to be trapped in. Maybe it's something to celebrate. You know, nobody to step in your laughs, no one to steal the reviews. You know, the truth is, I shared the stage with a perfect leading man. Maybe it's time to work alone. Attractive 70-year-old woman wishes to meet no one. It's almost scandalous, right? I hope I haven't overshared. And I know all of you have your own stories, and this would be the perfect time for us to have a lovely talkback where you shared those with me. But I would rather eat ground glass. So I'm just going to stop here, send you on your way. As the poet Philip Larkin said, what will survive of us is love. So whether you hold the memory of it in your heart as I do, or it's in full bloom in your life right now, or it's waiting for you in your future, treasure it. It's simply the best thing that can ever happen to you.